Dear participants, okay,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're audible.
right.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
right,
sir.
right.
Yes, sir.
Okay, right. Okay. So this and all evacuation routes, designating the assembly areas, this and all that under the plan condition, emergency planning documentation conditions, this and all has to be well documented in proper way. Factors which may cause major emergency. So plant failure conditions may be there, either some equipment failure, some valve failure, some leak into the process areas, tank burst, abnormal heating conditions, that heating element may get failure, cooling element may get failure. So in those conditions, plant failure means particular equipment. We are not talking about complete area, complete plant masses itself will not get failed. So particular process conditions, it may get failed. So in those ways only that our risk identification procedure, what is the, we have discussed the first parameter of the risk emergency planning and preparedness. In that condition, plant failure condition, what and all it has to be, those things has to be identified in proper ways, and can be corrected whatever it can be feasible. Human error conditions. So human error, normally in general conditions we can discuss unsafe act. What we unsafe act may occur. So normally we can see unskilled workforce may be there, or lack of confidence may be there. So loss of concentration also may be there. In that condition, human error may come. So those things can be corrected by the proper periodical education and training conditions. Proper skill can be developed into the for the sensitive operations. So in those proper that standard of operating procedures, work permit system, scheduling of the maintenance. So those things of person may get involved for those purposes. In that condition, they will be well sure about the building the confidence into the process operating conditions during emergency, how to handle the thing. For those purposes, they have to be well trained in that condition. Their response will be also in proper conditions. Vehicle crash. Vehicle crash, not general vehicle. So that tanker, the chemical tankers, if it is getting crashed somewhere. So during the within the plant premises, in that condition also, sudden burst of the tanks, sudden release of the chemicals, it may and all, it may get this thing, it may get disturbed. So those things it may get occur. So in those conditions, it will be sabotage conditions. So this is normally offsite conditions. Sabotage will earthquake also is around, but normally that we have seen plant failure, human error, vehicle crash can be controlled, can be prevented also. But sabotage, earthquake, natural calamities, so this and all may come under the untoward incident. So without planning, without any preparedness, at any time it may come. So in those conditions, what way it has to be responded. So those things also has to be understood, has to be well kept ready. So fire thing also. So where is the proximity of fire chances are there? In those conditions, how to control them, how to mitigate them, segregating the areas. Say uh, to keep into the some barricaded conditions. So other whatever the sensitive material may be there, complete cooling conditions, how and all it has to be controlled, how to be preserved, so how to be stored. So those things can be understood under the factors for causing the emergency conditions. And even then we have discussed now that in at any of the conditions we can tell that complete control it is not feasible, it is not possible in any of the technical process, etc. In those conditions we have to be ready for the emergency situation handling purposes also. So for that purposes it is required. Details of alarm and emergency shutdown control panels. So in this condition, normally you see that in our general conditions we are discussing. So buttons to increase or decrease the current alarm level. So normally either this type of the conditions or general conditions that it will be reflected to the control room or it will be communicated to the control room. In that condition, what and all coding will be there for alarming the people. So those and all, so this has to be proper documented conditions, that what way that that everyone can understand that emergency situation under the mock drill condition, it is well discussed, well communicated to the workforce. So by listening such type of the alarm, they can be well precaution. Yes, some emergency situation has come, some untoward incident has occurred. So in that condition, so some places normal general conditions. So how to increase or decrease the current alarm levels? Some places by chance due to control panel failure condition, also some places emergency alarm maker. So in that condition, how to reduce it? So by this thing, so this can be kept under control so that panic conditions should not get created. So here that one light or to indicate current alarm state, green, amber, red. So normally, so this such type of conditions it is being maintained into the alarm control panel. Some emergency shutdown conditions. So initiate major shutdown fires, explosive boards to release control lights. So how to communicate them, how to announce about the emergency situations in that conditions. So such type of alarm has to be communicated to the people. Emergency confirmed conditions. So it has to be now the real emergency has come or it has get uh, now under control. We have brought it into. So in that condition, so something may respond under the untoward incident, but it has brought under control conditions. Then cancellation of the emergency panel also. It means emergency either it has to go into the alarming condition or by signaling itself we can put it off. So those things also means simply we can understand by reset button. So by those ways it can be kept under observation, kept under control conditions. So types of emergency. So that we have discussed on-site emergency. There are two types of emergency in general: on-site emergency and off-site emergency. So normally, if an accident or incident takes place in a factory, its effects are confined to the factory premises, involving only the persons working in the factory and property inside the factory. It is called as on-site emergency. Normally, simply in general terms, we can understand that the emergencies which can be controlled by the resources available at the site premises itself. So those conditions we can understand simply on-site emergency. The emergency or the incident or accidents which can be controlled by the resources available at the site itself. So in means it can be prevented, can be controlled at the premises itself. In that conditions, it is usually called as on-site emergency. And off-site emergency which cannot be controlled by the premises itself. Means we can take some facilities from the adjacent factory area. Example, as we are under the MOU conditions, we can take fire tender some from adjacent areas, that's adjacent factory cluster areas. But it can be controlled completely, kept under control, and nearby area will not be disturbed. So in those conditions, we can count it as a on-site emergency conditions. And offsite emergency means it is not controlled conditions. So it can affect nearby local areas also. It can be by proper communicating means it cannot be controlled by the premises itself. So some ways it will be reflected into the adjacent areas also and nearby inhabitant areas also. So in that condition we can declare and district collector intervention also it is required in those conditions. So and extra precautions in the at the locality if it is required. It cannot be controlled by the local resources. So in those conditions we could declare is the offsite emergency. So if the accident is such that its effects inside the factory are uncontrollable and it may spread outside the factory premises, it is called as offsite emergency, like vapor release, toxic release. Normally, when it can go into the atmosphere conditions and either by hazard conditions, by toxicity conditions, by fire conditions, this end of factory premises conditions, by the flood, storm, earthquake, sabotage, etc. So those things cannot be done anything by the plant premises. In that condition, we can declare it as the offset emergency. So why emergency planning? Again, we are discussing a definite plan to deal with major emergencies is an important element of occupational health and safety program. So proper planning, proper response conditions has to be met. What it has to be responded in case of emergency conditions. So those and all well preparation of the thing it is required. Besides the major emergency, developing the plan has other advantages. So proper planning has other advantages. has to be advantage. You may discover unrecognized hazardous conditions that would aggravate an emergency situation, and you can work to eliminate them. So normally our the risk assessment, risk identification helps us to control the emergency situation, to mitigate the emergency situation. In that condition also proper guide proper emergency planning preparedness it is required, because for that purposes some identification has to be made. Simply by sitting at one place we can't point out some regions that due to so and so region it may occur. About on-site emergency planning I am discussing. So in that condition, so if we are going into the site by the checklist conditions, by the verification of the conditions, by the process parameter, thermodynamical principles of the process conditions, in those ways if we are going on in that regard for the study purposes, for the seeing the hazard conditions, so then something it may come into our observation that can be controlled. If it is can be controlled, or some control measures by applying some control measures, if it can be under the controlled conditions, then we can then emergency planning can be in proper ways. And it can be somewhat limitation of the areas about the emergency situations we can make it. The planning process may bring to cover up the deficiencies. So proper planning also it may be so in that condition. So somewhere some places some deficiencies are there. Those things helps us to correct the deficiency also, such as the lack of resources. Some places by chance some equipment are not there. Trained personnel are also not there. Supplies of the material also may not be. In those conditions, by chance something have been identified. By fulfilling those requirements, then we can avoid the emergency situation. So those things can be in proper conditions. It can be observed at the study level conditions or items that can be corrected. Some places that we have discussed that maintenance conditions, some control measures. If extra control measures we have to implement it. Some normally we are seeing in chemical plant or pressure vessels, etc. So in the at the vent line, we are not rely upon the only one valve conditions, all pressure release valve conditions. In those things, always it is but in that parallel line, at least two that this one valve pressure release valve is being fitted. So normally in those conditions, whether it is working or not, so those things also has to be properly documented, properly tested at the time to time, so that in that conditions, so some hazard at the some limit hazard can be mitigated. So those things we can count it out. In addition, an emergency plan promotes safety awareness and shows the organization's commitment to the safety of workers. So by the proper planning, proper educating, proper monitoring conditions, if it is being observed into the premises in that conditions, so we have discussed that one motivation will go into the workers, that some, so this and all, these risks and all have been identified, have been observed, and those things, what way we have to communicate and what way we have to respond, that our workers, everybody will not go into the responsibilities. Only somebody, they have to be uh, they have to discharge their responsibilities. In that conditions it has to be observed. So those ways safety awareness, so the organizational commitment also. The lack of an emergency plan could lead to severe losses. So emergency planning not being done. Proper study for this purposes is required, such as and possible financial collapses of the organization also may get. So those things also has to be understood. Since emergencies, to tackle pre-planning is necessary. So emergencies, if it has to be handled, so pre-planning it is required at the subsequent steps. So what and all proper planning has to be. An urgent need for rapid decisions has to be met. So what way the decisions has to be made in proper conditions, shortage of time, it has within the short time it has to be responded, and lack of resources and trained personals can lead to chaos during an emergency. So in this condition, normally we are so shortage of time it should not be. So because we have seen that any emergency situation will not allow us time. So anything can happen. In that condition, at the subsequent emergency, at the immediate conditions, what way it has to be responded. So those things has to be well prepared, and everything has to be kept under controlled conditions, has to be kept under readiness conditions. Resources has to be well available. trained personnel, skilled persons, skilled group, they have to be well available. Even in the duty schedules also, it is being observed that suppose some places shift schedules are being run. In those conditions, in all the groups, it has to be observed that our personnel has to be well available at all the time. So those things also has to be made ready. In that condition, also shift scheduling also has to be maintained in proper ways. Time and circumstances in an emergency mean that normal channels of authority and communication cannot be relied upon to function routinely. So in that condition, we can't see that. The stress of the situation can lead to poor judgment, resulting in severe losses. So, I mean, because due to chaos conditions, due to emergency conditions, person will be in very much panic conditions. So in these conditions, so also poor judgment also may come. So those things may come. So to prepare those things, to well prepared for such conditions, so proper planning it is required. A well thought out, well organized emergency response plan will help to eliminate these issues. So, to take the prompt corrective actions, to save lives and suffering and injuries, to protect plant machines, equipment, normally that adjacent areas should not come disturbed into the financial losses or emergency conditions. So what we it can be contained. So those things also it is required to protect loss of material, to protect and minimize property losses, to resume normal situation or operation within minimum possible time. For those conditions also means how to kept under our control conditions. So those things also helps us out. Emergency plan comes into effect at the declaration of emergency and extends up to termination of the emergency. So when emergency has been declared, till that all clear sign has been given. So up to that time, complete emergency, it will be counted. So those things has to be observed, has to be understood. It is applicable to all employees and persons available in the plant facilities. So normally emergencies for complete plant itself, complete premises itself, it is being declared, not for a particular division. So in this condition, all employees and persons available, so it is applicable for everybody. In those we are observing in the mountain condition, particular site, particular division only it is getting acted. But no, but complete premises has to be well educated, has to be well reflected. Though normally in those conditions we are seeing that emergency systems are not being put off, but in those conditions will be in our premises. Those things also has to be well identified conditions. They have to well respond in, they have to respond in well advance also. So in that regard also, this preparedness it is required. Infrastructure requirement. What way some infrastructure has to be developed. Procedures for declaration of on-site and off-site emergencies. So what procedure has to be adopted? So these things. Resource for controlling emergency. So what and all resources will be there? Or during emergency situation, what and all control things will be? Demographic information, medical facilities, evacuation, what way it has to be, public relations, what how to communicate the people, how to keep under controlled conditions, how to handle the situations, reporting of the incident, emergency recovery procedures, emergency plans for tank, trucks, pipelines, carrying hazardous products. So under the emergency conditions, what way the route will be, what way they can be taken it out. So those things also has to be observed in proper conditions. Pre-emergency preparedness, it involves information on the preliminary hazard analysis. Proper hazard analysis we have made it, type of accident, what and all it can be, system elements or events that can lead to major accident or hazards, safety relevant components. So what and all sensitive elements of the process condition, what way it can go wrong and how it can get failed. So those things we are discussing. Then details about the site. So what is the geographical conditions? What is the climatic conditions? So those things. So those impacts may come into the process conditions also. So in this condition also it has to be location of the dangerous substances, seat of the key person. Seat of the key means that emergency under emergency conditions, communication numbers, which name, designation, etc. has to be well documented. Emergency control room. So under the emergency conditions, so where and all control room has to be developed. Who and all will be sitting over there, how they have to respond, how many telephone numbers, this etc. will be the proper documentation has to be met. The relevant components we have observed in that conditions, this will be observed. Then description of hazardous chemicals at plant site. So chemicals, quantity, toxicological data, transformation, some by chance some due to some reactions within the chamber, something may get transformed. So those things. So the reaction kinetics also has to be observed. Purity of hazardous chemicals. So what way it is, how much percentage of the purity it is. So those things. Likely dangers to the plant. Enumerate effects of accident. So what and all effects after effects of accident, what and all it may be. Those things also has to be. Stress and strain caused during normal operation. So during normal operations, what and all some stress may come. So those things also has to be observed. So person should be in comfortable condition of working also. Fire and explosion inside the plant and effect if any. So these things has to be counted for the pre-emergency preparedness conditions. What and all it may occur and what may be our control measures, control features, what and all it has to be. So those things also has to be well prepared. Emergency level classification. So this is classified under the different category, different level. So which can be effectively, level 1 says about which can be effectively and safely managed and contained within the site or location or installation by the available resources. We have discussed that as on-site emergency has no impact outside the site, location or installation site of the machineries. So level 1, that on-site emergency, what we have discussed. Level 2, we are discussing about the we are nominating as a cannot be effectively and safely managed or contained at the location or installation by available resources. And additional support is alerted or required. So additional support or outside external support is required. So is having or loss the potential to have an effect beyond the site, location or installation, and where external support of mutual aid partner may be involved. So complete premises adjacent area also make it under the emergency condition, under the abnormal conditions, or is likely to danger to life, environment, or to industrial assets or reputation. So these are classifying as off-site emergency. So level 2, normal, level 1, level 2 as per the industrial classifications. So it is level 3, simply catastrophic conditions, the geographical conditions that earthquake, tsunami, etc. This and all, which could be catastrophic and is likely to affect the population, property, and environment inside and outside the installation. And management and control is done by the district administration. So normally level 2, level 3 both are clubbed for the offsite emergency declaration purposes, but for the industrial understanding purposes, level 1 under the complete which can be controlled within the premises itself will be level 1, and level 2 and 3 both is combined for the declaration of offsite emergencies. In that condition, district authority has to be under the power and they have to direct the groups, the persons to how to handle the emergency situations. An emergency plan specifies procedures for handling sudden or unexpected situations. The objective is to prepare to prevent fatalities and injuries. What way it can be prevented? Reduce damage to buildings, stock and equipment, protect the environment and the community. So what environment community will be well secured, well safe. That has to be. Accelerate the resumption of normal operations. So normal, so in normalcy, how to bring it out. So those things also. Development of the plan begins with a vulnerability assessment. How likely a situation is to occur. So whether the probability will be high, so then control measures has to be implemented. What means are available to stop or prevent the situation? What is necessary for a given situation? So this and all. So necessity about the situation prepares for the emergency conditions, and available resources to prevent the situation brings out the mitigation and prevention of the plants. In those conditions it can be acted upon. So from this analysis, the appropriate emergency processes can be established. If whatever we have discussed in that conditions, it can be well documented and well prepared. In that pre-planning, preparedness can be kept under order conditions. At the planning stage, it is important that the relevant individuals or groups be asked to participate. So under the mock drill conditions has to be, everybody has to participate. Members of the team may be employees with knowledge of the work, so how they will act and how they have to respond to conditions. Supervisor of the area or work, so they will be well experienced person, they have to be well informed. So in those conditions they can be involved. Safety officer, health and safety committee also can be included for the this for planning conditions, planning purposes. Some places details are there, so those groups also can be included under the response emergency response conditions. Employees with experience in investigation. So what way, if it is probability is high, severity is high, it can be controlled. So those things can be under the risk assessment and investigation conditions, so that that particular emergency situation may not recur in future. For that purpose, proper history also is required. Then outside experts here also, if it is required for the planning purposes of the emergency preparedness, so those things also can be included into the committees. So these things and all are the purposes for the emergency scope and objective of the planning. So in these ways are there. So now time we are running about time. So in this condition now I will hand it over to Mr. Gyanasundar for standard statutes. And about the question session, we will keep at the last. So some questions if it is, so we can discuss at the last. So I am handing it over for the standard statutes to Mr. Gyanasundar, the additional assistant director of this office. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. That's standards and statutes. Second one. This one. You may not trust this. Come on. Okay. That's just Hello, good morning. Hello, are you hearing?
Yes, good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir. Good
Yes,
morning.
sir.
Okay, good morning.
Very good morning, sir.
Are you able to see this slide?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I am Yana Sundaram, Additional Assistant Director Safety. So far we have seen about scope and objective of emergency planning, about the on-site emergency preparedness in industries and port. So every area there is an law is there. So any work places, or if we are in the common people, we have to obey certain laws. All the things harmonized, agreed and documented way of doing something, standardization of some procedures. Standards contain technical specification or other precise criteria designed to be used consistently as a rule, guideline or definition. All you are knowing. And about the statutes is a formal written enactment of legislative authority that governs the legal entity of a city, state or country by way of consent. So this is the statutory provisions. So now about the emergency preparedness, particularly we are going to see with what are all the important our own laws, our act are there that we are going to see. See standards and statutes on emergency preparedness. First one, it is Factory Act. All the factory or industry or in working group, working in various places, all you are knowing about it. There is one act is there. That act, it is called a Factory Act, framed in 1948. Okay, similarly, manufacture, storage, import of hazardous chemical rules, 1989. So
this is framed after the Factory Act. Okay, 1989. Later on, the Control of Major Accident Hazard Regulations 1999. Then ISO 18001 2007. Okay, in between, if you wanted to know about the dock area where the ships are coming for loading, unloading, and transporting. So those area, there is one law is there. It is called Dock Worker Safety, Health and Welfare Act 1986. From the 25 sections, 118 regulations are there. So that is called the Dock Worker Safety, Health and Welfare Regulation 1990. So and many other laws are there, but that is not related with this um, emergency preparedness. So we are concerned about the emergency preparedness on today's class. So what is said in the Factory Act 1948 related with the employer, related with the emergency preparedness, that we are going to see first. Then MSIHC rules, then the Control of Major Accident Hazard, IS 18001, and Dock Workers Act. So my time is very, very limit, up to 11 or 11:15 I can go. So within that time, we'll try to complete. Okay. So now this is about the factory set up, Factory Act 1948. So the Factory Act 1948, there are having now, there are different chapters. Chapter 1, it is said about the preliminary, that is section 1 to 7 of different thing, short title, interpretation, and power to declare, different department, power to exempt during public emergency, like that. Some 7 sections are there. It is chapter 1. Chapter 2, the inspecting staff. Inspecting staff means in the factory, employed by the government, the state government, they are